Right. Oh, it does work. Hello, my name is Olivia. And with the help of the Center for World Performance Studies, I went to Bali for 6 weeks this summer to study Balinese Gamelan. So Gamelan refers to a traditional Indonesian orchestra or ensemble, and there are various types. One of the types that we just played for you is called wayang, and thanks again to Gavin for his wonderful playing and for his mentorship. It typically accompanies shadow puppet plays in Bali, and the piece that we just played is called Krepetan. So, before I go on, a little bit of information about myself. I'm a second-year master's student in percussion performance, and this may seem like it doesn't make sense in the context of this presentation, but it will, I promise you. I have ADHD, and I consider this a pretty integral part of my identity as a musician. It particularly means a few things. One, I involve myself in too many creative projects and musical interests. And two, I'm particularly interested in memory and retention within music pedagogy. So I do a lot of self-observation of this within my own practice as a percussionist and a musician. So remember these things, as I feel that it will contextualize things for you later. So with this in mind, Balinese Gamelan was actually a pretty perfect candidate to become one of my interests, or special interests, as you may call them. The music is learned by rote, which means it's worked into your long-term memory through physical, oral, and visual learning, a lot of repetition without any sheet music. And my first time playing gamelan was in February of 2022, when Gavin asked me to play wayang for a concert. Since then, I've been increasingly involved with the University of Michigan Gamelan since the fall of 2022. And over time, this became a super important performance practice to me. So I grew fascinated with not only the music itself, but the way my own brain responds to the type of learning. And this led to my desire to know more and dig deeper and to become more proficient. This is Bali. It's very cute and very small. This is an image that I sent my mom when she was worried about the fact that I was driving around the island by myself, just to put it in perspective. And here are a few pictures from my trip, including some of my favorite Balinese snacks, a rainstorm that I got caught in on my motorbike, which I got injured on various times, and also me eating a type of food called wayang, which was super delicious, and then I got a little bit sick the next day, but it was absolutely worth it. So during my 6 weeks, I studied 3 types of gamelan primarily. Wayang, which is what I just played for you, that was my primary focus, as well as gamelan angklung and gamelan selonding. I chose to focus on these types because these were the types that I had the most experience in my time in the US. For some background, wayang and gamelan angklung are both deeply tied to Balinese Hinduism. Today, about 87% of the island identifies as Hindu. And these are pictures from a Hindu ceremony that I attended while I was in Bali that one of my teachers played at. I did not play at this performance. I didn't get the chance to do any public performances, but I observed a lot of them and attended a lot of them. And gamelan selonding, the other type that I studied, is from East Bali. It's tied to the animistic religions that predate Balinese Hinduism. Over time, many of these traditions have melded with those of Balinese Hinduism as well. On the right here, you can also see a type of ceremony that I attended. This is not my photo, but it's a ceremony called Nukadakare, where you fight with pandan leaves. They're spiky, and then you hit each other on the back. I should have included a video, but it would have been too much of a tangent. So that was a ceremony that I attended where there was some gamelan selonding performance. All 3 of these types of gamelan are primarily used for traditional religious ceremonies, but are also being increasingly used in a modern context. So while I was there, I received a lot of reassurance that even though I was an outsider to the tradition, I was still encouraged that it was definitely okay for me to be playing these instruments and learning these works and using them in a modern context. For example, here's a poster of an electroacoustic gamelan concert that I attended during my trip. So not only did it include traditional instruments, but it also included some fixed media, live processing, lots of microphones and synth, if you don't know what those prior terms mean. But it was a nice, modern, fresh take on gamelan performance. I primarily explored two main topics during my research in Bali. First of all, I wanted to learn more about the pedagogy and performance practice of Balinese Gamelan. So asking myself questions like, how can I develop a stronger grasp of these various styles, improving my technical facility as well as gaining contextual and repertoire knowledge? What are the primary pedagogical methods of each of my teachers in Bali? So the teaching format, the flow, the method, as well as my method for learning them. And how does it inform my practice as a percussionist? Secondly, I wanted to better inform myself as a performer and a future educator of gamelan, asking myself what authority, if any, do I have to perform, spread knowledge about, and teach others Balinese Gamelan music, and how can I best approach the performance, education, and advocacy of Balinese Gamelan in a way that is informed, respectful, and appropriate. My two primary methods for research were taking lessons and recording them, as well as journaling about my overall experiences. So when taking private lessons, I gathered information through participant observation, so by doing and taking lessons, audio recordings, video recordings on my phone as well. And these not only served as an archive for my repertoire, but also helped me go back and reference material for learning purposes. So I would go back to my hotel room after lessons, and I would sit there with my phone and be like, I kind of remember how that went, and be referencing the material in real time as I was learning and practicing it. I also was able to observe in retrospect the flow of teaching and learning in each lesson. And my journal was very thorough. I kept it through my entire 6 weeks. It served as an index for my time in Bali. So I go back and reference it whenever I'm wondering, like, oh, I forget what that term is, or like, I wonder what day I did that, or what's the name of this piece. It covered my lesson material, my personal observations, my daily events, my concerts that I observed, as well as informal conversations that I had with all of my teachers. And this was a great opportunity to reflect on my own experience during lessons. I often recalled how difficult pieces were, why I thought they were so difficult, and my own thoughts about rote learning and my personal learning process. I wrote down as many details as possible that I could remember about any ceremonies and public performances I attended, names of pieces, composers, things like that. And by just participating in gamelan performance for a couple years prior to my trip, I was gaining experience that would be super valuable for my time there. This experience, in addition to having meetings and lots of talks with my friend and mentor Gavin, and reading literature on Bali in advance, I learned a lot about the ethics behind teaching and performing gamelan. Sorry, I'm talking so much about Gavin, but Gavin's like the reason I did this, so thanks, Gavin. Having done a Fulbright in Bali and traveled there multiple times was an incredible resource and super helpful when I was preparing for my research. I also tried to frame my experience in a way that was kind of a blank slate, so I knew that culturally there would be a lot of differences from my own experiences, but just being aware of that and recognizing the difference and that was okay. I also definitely compensated my teachers for their time, was in contact ahead of time, and always made sure that recording was appropriate. So I either asked, or if everyone else had their phones out, I was like, all right, this is fine to record, or if not, I was like, maybe I should just keep my phone away from this one. I can happily say that I answered all of my research questions. I gained a greater understanding of the pedagogy and performance practice. My technical skills as a performer improved, and my rote learning skills got stronger, as exhibited by my performance today. I definitely would not have been able to do that like 6 months ago. I learned more repertoire and now feel capable to teach and perform these pieces. I was able to observe rote learning and teaching through participant observation and through my lessons as I was constantly reflecting on the learning process for myself. And I now feel much more confident in my ability as a performer and a teacher of gamelan, and I developed a greater understanding of how to teach and perform in an informed, respectful, and appropriate way. But how I actually did all of this is really interesting, because I think I learned the most through doing and through action. I realized that a big chunk of my research and understanding of my project was just through living in a new place and understanding the day-to-day rhythm of things. I learned a lot just by existing in Bali for 6 weeks. And even if indirect, it still informed what I was studying. In a way, there were many things that I learned about and absorbed non-verbally. This includes aspects of culture and context, and attitudes surrounding music and performance. A great example of this is a sense of flow that I felt permeated many aspects of my day-to-day observations in Bali. There were many moments in which I felt an incredible sense of awareness among groups of people, from the way that many vehicles on a Balinese road operate as one organism, except me, I was the odd one out, to the way that musicians communicated on stage as if they were able to read each other's minds flawlessly. There was this transcendence of individualism into a feeling of collectivism that I really enjoyed. I also, quite simply, just learned more background about the culture I was studying. Getting dressed for ceremonies, these are my surong in the middle that you can see, attending performances in the Bali Arts Festival, and seeing how instruments were made were invaluable to my understanding of the music that I enjoyed so much. It's a very different experience to be there than to read about it, see videos, or hear stories, even though there are many stories that I've heard. Through doing and action, I also had a lot of personal observations about my own learning process. Here's an entry from my journal that I believe does a really great job of explaining this. Quote, I want to have more to say about the teaching and pedagogy of Balinese Gamelan as I've observed thus far. But I think the more that I learn, the more that I'm coming to terms with the fact that this knowledge is gained by doing and taught through action and habit. It's very physical and not easily described by words. Doing so can be detrimental to the learning process and ability to latch onto concepts and idioms quickly. As a Western musician, I can say that in Western pedagogy, there's a propensity for over-intellectualizing and over-textualizing. Truly though, the patterns and sequences I'm learning are held in my hands and my ear, and learning by rote is something that doesn't require a lot of language. Perhaps, can we start from here, or 2 times, or more softly, are the types of words that we can use in conjunction to rote learning, but this is supplemental to the information that is primarily transferred through physical action into long-term memory. So, if you can recall, I said earlier at the beginning that memory and retention are a huge interest of mine. It's something I think about every day, and what's really interesting is how natural my research in Bali felt when I was focused on holistically absorbing all of this information, rather than trying to fit it into the same box with which I try to comprehend Western music. A typical day in my life at Michigan is one in which I'm strongly fighting with my ability to retain things, and I struggle with my memory a lot. I'm reminded of my ADHD every single day when it becomes very disabling in the practice room, actually. But learning Balinese Gamelan by rote, even though it's no easy feat, I find the learning flow it makes much more sense for my brain. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I enjoy the process. Even though I wasn't learning as fast as a Balinese musician, or granted, a Balinese child taking lessons, who I watched next to me and went, oh wow, I wish I could play like that. I was deeply satisfied by this type of process. Because I was memorizing music with my body and my ears and my eyes, this knowledge felt thorough, like riding a bike. Things you may forget, but as soon as you revisit them, they feel familiar. Through action and habit, repetition, and physical awareness, it becomes a very deep part of your body's memory. This has made me rethink, these are pictures from our most recent concert that we had 2 days ago, courtesy of Paige Madden, who's not here today, and her lovely iPhone camera.
Hello.
This has made me rethink my learning process for classical music as well. And it has made me ask myself, how can I view this less as a translation of notes on a page and more as a deeply known action for my body? When I revisit these works, they feel like a part of my body that never left. I still, of course, encounter difficulties with technique or lapses in memory, but I find that my own relationship with performance is completely transformed when I play gamelan. Through surpassing text and functioning primarily through multimodal, repetitive learning, oral, physical, and visual, the process of learning Balinese Gamelan by rote is one of habit formation and automaticity. I also observed some attitudes toward musicianship in Bali that I found particularly interesting to think about. Generally, many of the musicians in Bali have other jobs as well. Music doesn't define their whole identities, but at the same time their identities as musicians are undeniable and competent, and everyone around them will attest to their musicianship. As many Western musicians do, Western classical musicians do, I frequently battle with making music my whole identity and whole sense of self-worth, yay! It's really easy within classical music academia to internalize narratives of these successful artists in unrealistic and harmful ways, but Bali offered me perspective. And it reminded me that these narratives are manufactured and not a true reflection of what it means to be a musician. There's also an overwhelming connection between community and music making in Bali. There was always a sense of joy and positive attitudes surrounding performance, and audience reactions were incredibly passionate and engaged. From what I observed, many of the traditions involved in Balinese performance encourage the sense of community as well, such as musicians eating nasi campur on stage together pre-performance, which is the food you see on the left here, or talking and drinking coffee together during ceremonies. While on one hand, this made me feel slightly isolated as an outsider and a non-Indonesian speaker, it made me reflect on my own prior experience. The moments in which I find the most joy in performance are when I focus on the sense of community. Bali was an incredible reminder of this and served in contrast to many of my experiences prior. Going forward, my research is manifesting the most in my current and ongoing experience teaching and performing. I have audio and video documentation of all of the pieces I learned, both traditional works and works by living composers. And my goal is to bring these pieces, the names of these composers, and my stories and experiences working with musicians in Bali to more people in the United States. What's also really awesome is that I'm getting the chance to try that out this semester. I've been assisting with teaching the Balinese Gamelan, teaching classes every other week for this past semester. So we just had a concert 2 nights ago. More pictures. And it was amazing. Not only am I passing along this repertoire by rote to students in Michigan, but I've also practiced some transcribing as well for teaching purposes. So flipping back, this picture on the right, I'm me sitting here and my brain is hurting because I'm sitting there trying to transcribe a piece of music. I'm now able to apply knowledge about Bali and the balance between respecting tradition and promoting innovation to my position as an educator. I'm certainly not a professional, but I'm learning more and more every day about how to take my research and apply it to my own teaching. I'm gaining more confidence through the teaching of Gamelan, and I'm also feeling more comfortable and confident as a performer of this music as well. So, for my future plans, nothing is set in stone, but I'd love to continue learning, performing, and teaching, and I hope to travel back to Bali to study for a longer period of time. I'd like to do that so I can narrow my research focus a little more, learn more repertoire, develop my skills as a performer further, and learn more about Balinese experimental music specifically. It's a really hard niche to get into when you don't speak the language, so that's why I only attended one experimental concert. I would love to learn the Indonesian language beforehand, so I feel this would afford me more opportunities and allow me to participate in the sense of community in Bali. Thank you for your time.